Heat fan got the Miami logo tattooed on his head. Now, our senior tattoo analyst, producer Nate, skeptical of the authenticity here, guys. But if it is real, Matt, as a player, would you respect the fans' dedication?
That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. If you're going to do something that's that permanent on your head, at least make it like the quality of the tattoo isn't even good. That's just
Man.
He needs to slap himself for that.
Ooh.
I think because we didn't see. Right? Aren't you a little skeptical, Zach?
I have a lot of questions about this guy's loved ones. Are they okay
Jobs,
with
security?
More about them than him. I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of questions for them.
I mean, look, I think the good thing about it being on your head, assuming you could, right, Matt, have it on, you could grow hair over it? No?
It's going to be hard.
I think because we didn't see the needle going in the head.
It looks real to me, though. It looks real to me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols alongside NBA champ Matt Barnes. ESPN senior writer Zach Lowe joins us from Connecticut. Coming up today, the 8-year anniversary of the Thunder trading away James Harden to the Rockets. What if they, didn't break up the big three of KD, Russ, and James? We will discuss that later in the show. First, though, welcome to the NBA roller coaster. It's one thing to say, so how about starting next season on December 22nd? It's another thing to actually make that work. And with this Friday as the deadline for the league and union to come to an agreement on so much of this, the next 3 days are going to be full of ups and downs, loop-de-loops, and all the rest. Like, how's this for a twist? Yesterday, we got Danny Green on the Ringer NBA show proclaiming that if the league really does start next season 10 weeks after the NBA Finals, he doesn't expect LeBron James or several of the other Lakers vets to show up for the first month.
I think most guys, if they said we start in December, I think they're like, I'm not going to be there. If I had to guess, because we have a lot of vets on our team. LeBron's been in the finals 10 years out of his 17 years, which is unbelievable mentally. It's draining to do that. And to have that quick of a restart, I wouldn't expect to see him there. I wouldn't expect to see him probably for the first month of the season.
I totally get where Danny is coming from on this. I also have to say, if the NBA is handing out championship rings the night of December 22nd, I would expect LeBron James will not only be accepting his ring, but will be playing in that game. And personally, I really like the overall idea of such a quick turnaround. All last month, when NBA owners kept indicating they wanted to wait to start until they were allowed to have a meaningful amount of ticket-buying fans in the stands, I kept saying on this show that, well, I want a pony, but that wasn't happening anytime soon either. And at some point, it becomes dangerous to the health of the sport to just keep waiting and waiting for medical advancements that could be 6 months away or more. By the way, after I said that, several of you out there actually offered me a pony, which is sort of missing the point, but also delightful, so thank you. Anyway, I think it is great that owners seem to have come to terms with the fact that, like so many of us, they are just going to have to adjust their expectations for this year. There will be less money to go around. The work conditions won't be ideal. At some point, you just dig in and do it. Avoiding your finals running into the Olympics is smart. Avoiding your finals running into football season is smart. Preserving Christmas as the NBA's day is smart, not just generally in the long term, but specifically this season, when starting in late December will reportedly prevent the league from losing additional hundreds of millions in revenue. Plus, you get the fun music. For more of 2/3 of the league's teams, the ones that didn't go deep in the playoffs, it won't even be that short of an offseason. Of course, just because something is a good overall idea doesn't mean it isn't going to be super complicated. There is the negotiation with the players, who are likely going to be asked to put up to 40% of their salaries in escrow to balance out the projected loss of revenue. There's figuring out how many games the season would be. 72 is a popular number right now, but could that change? And how is the league going to handle positive COVID tests if it plays outside a bubble? We've seen non-bubble leagues like the NFL already have to reschedule games, and that's with the benefit of 6 days between games and properly testing and containing outbreaks. The NBA would be attempting several games a week with players who sweat and breathe all over each other, not in a giant open-air stadium, but in a closed arena. And what about the states where the local government does allow, say, even just 500 fans in the building? Are players going to be okay with breathing all of their air, too? There's also the issue of the calendar leading into the December start. Right now, the NBA draft isn't scheduled until November 18th and free agency not until after that. If training camps start December 1st, it is hard to make the math work on the time needed for players coming from far away to quarantine. And if a team does have a run of COVID rip through the building, there's no pad built into training camp for players to get back onto the court in any kind of game shape, not to mention the threat of actual serious illness. It's a lot. So leave your sunglasses and hats at the turnstile, buckle up, and get ready for quite a ride. All right, Matt, so how do you think players like LeBron, say, as Danny Green pointed out, will handle the shortened offseason if training camps really are back on December 1st?
I don't think they'll like it. I think it's too fast, and I'm not looking at dollar signs or revenue for owners or anything. I'm looking at players, and not only was last year a unique situation physically, emotionally, but it was mentally draining.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people don't take that into account too often when you think about athletes. Those guys were mentally exhausted along with physically exhausted. So I think to start this fast after the season just ended is a bad move. I understand you want to, ratings, but to me it's more about having your star players ready to play for the long haul. And I think if you start too early, you're going to risk injury with a lot of these guys that had to make a long run into the playoffs.
Yeah, when money faces off against purity of the game, money wins, and money is going to win this too. LeBron and Anthony Davis are going to show up on Christmas or December 22nd. Whether they play or not is the question, and I do think there will be some load management. There'll be some easing into the season. There will be some straight up ugly basketball for the first 2 months of the season, and forget about all, and that's even leaving aside all the complications with the virus that, Rachel, you talked about in the monologue and the schedule and all of that. But look, I mean, some players haven't played already in 7 months. Some of those guys are probably in great shape. Keep doing what you're doing. Some of those guys, maybe they got out of shape. They got to start ramping up. It's going to be different for each player. It stinks for the teams who won the championship or got to the finals in the bubble. It is a quick turnaround, and everyone's just going to have to deal with it because money is going to win this argument. That's the bottom line.
Well, the thing to remember, too, is it's not all players. And look, the bottom 8 teams in the league, Matt, were asked to sacrifice, right? They did a bubble without them. And those 8 teams were told, hey, sorry about this. You're just not going to play for maybe up to even a year. Now, it's not going to turn out that long. But still, we're leaving you out for health and safety reasons. And this is going to go on without you. Well, now it's the top 8 teams that are basically going to be asked to sacrifice.
And that's who most likely you're going to see a majority of those top 8 teams back in the playoffs. I think the only teams that got left out that are going to be in the mix here are Golden State and Brooklyn. But outside of that, to me, like I said, I think you want to err on the side of caution when it comes to this. And I understand what Zach is saying. I mean, money rules the world, not only in sports, but just the world in general. So money probably will possibly win. But I agree, if they do come back before the turn of the year, it's going to be a lot of management. They possibly could play on the opening night because there's so much energy and emotion.
Or
but
Christmas,
then we're going to start complaining about the load management, starting with some of these guys that had to make these runs. So it's a tough situation. I wish them the best of luck trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and that is going to be tough if we get into January and the Tuesday game is 2 teams playing without stars. And it's not going to look quite how it looks in the bubble, right? Unless every arena builds those huge video boards. No matter how dramatic you make the lighting, you're going to see empty seats. You're going to see some of the stuff we've seen in the other sports that make it just feel kind of more rec league-y than really official. So they're going to have to work out a lot. They're also going to have to work out the calendar, Zach, just to get to the start of the season. Right now, the NBA draft is scheduled for November 18th. Now, that was moved back about a month. I was always curious, why move it back so far? And now I want to know, are you going to move it forward again? Because if you're going to start training camp on December 1st, Zach, wouldn't it be smart to give yourself a little extra time? Just move it, maybe just push it another week earlier or something to let free agency and teams report and players come from overseas?
I think the way they're going to build in the extra time is probably to do the opposite, which is move free agency up from a potential start date of December 1 to maybe right after the draft. Maybe we'll just do one cycles right into the other. Just get everything all rolling together in one. I made a couple of calls today. I have not heard any buzz about moving the draft earlier. I'm not even sure they could do that now. Maybe it's too late. I mean, the reason they pushed it is because we still don't know what the salary cap is. We still don't know what the luxury tax is. We still have no idea what the salary cap is going to be. And we have some idea for 21-22 season, and they have to work all that out. So I'm not sure they could mechanically make the draft sooner. I mean, I guess they could. Very few people are going to the quote-unquote physical draft, but I have not yet heard any buzz about it. And even whatever they do, it is just going to be a mad dash till December 22nd if that's what it ends up being. Buckle up.
Yeah, and then you also have to keep in mind if the draft is November 18th, you're giving these rookies 2 weeks to get to the city they need to be in and get all situated. It's a lot going on. I would say keep the draft where it's at and move the season back. But if you're going to keep this season where it's at, I think you need to push the draft a little bit forward. Maybe a week or 10 days earlier, just so you got to give people time to get acclimated to their situations, travel, guys coming from out of the country. There's just a lot of factors that weigh into this move. So like I said, it's a tough situation. I hope they get it right.
I mean, I know, Zach, that you're saying that you haven't heard. I've talked to a bunch of our other about moving the draft, forward, back. I don't know how we say it, right? Earlier in the month. Let's say it that way. I would say they should consider it, or maybe just consider doing what some of us have been asking the league to do for years, which is flip free agency in the draft. Zach, how about a free agency show on November 10th instead? What do you think?
Look, I'm all for anything. I do think free agency before the draft makes a lot of sense. That's the way football does it. I think there's sort of a cognitive sense to that. And by the way, I agree with what Matt said. December 22nd to me is not set in stone until it's set in stone. And maybe the league and its TV partners and the union, maybe everyone agrees to that. But I thought Martin Luther King Day was kind of a nice compromise date where it's sooner than people expected, but not this crazy mad rush. But maybe that's off the table. I don't know. I don't think it should be off the table,
and then you got to keep in mind, too, when is the All-Star game now?
Well, right now, the proposal is no All-Star game.
Maybe never.
Because it would be too hard to, if you're especially in a virus environment, do you really want to take representatives of 30 teams and put them all in one place? Can't possibly have fans in the building. They're talking about maybe offering players, and again, this is why this week is going to be so nuts, because these negotiations are happening right now. They're talking about maybe offering players a 2-week break at a time when an All-Star game would normally come in a calendar. Except, again, if they have to start canceling games due to positive COVID tests, it's pretty easy to see those games leaking into that 2-week break. I don't know. I would certainly say maybe get started. If you're going to start games on December 22nd, maybe start with the rest of it a little earlier. You got time. You still have 3 weeks. You could do stuff in that time. I'm just saying. Coming up, we're going to talk about Anthony Davis. He says LeBron told him the Lakers are his team now, but is that BS?
The ball deserves to go in the crowd after a bull move like that.
I think it's bull.
I just thought it was bull.
Don't give me that crap!
Welcome back to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols with Matt Barnes, Zach Lowe, and oh yeah, look what it's time for. BS or real talk. We give you quotes, you give us the emojis to react to them. First up, Pat Riley said in an interview with the Miami Herald after reflecting on the Heat's finals loss to the Lakers, quote, "They beat us fair and squarely, but there will always be that asterisk. There we go. Before you get all crazy, he clarified those comments did not mean that the Lakers have an asterisk. He told the Associated Press's Tim Reynolds, quote, "The asterisk is next to the Heat's name, not the Lakers. The title is legitimate. Our loss has the asterisk next to it. The Lakers were the better team, period." So, Zach, is Pat saying the asterisk next to the Heat's name is BS or real talk? What do you think?
Look, I've lost track of where the asterisk is supposed to be, how many news cycles we're going to get out of these comments. I call BS on the entire thing. I want the word asterisk out of the lexicon of sports altogether, and not only because I can't say it right ever. I just think injuries are a part of sports. 3 of the last 6 finals have had major injuries. It's just part of the deal. You never have to apologize for winning a championship. It's just part of life. I strike the whole thing. It's BS. I never want to hear the word again.
I love Pat. Love him to death. But it's BS. You just got to take this loss on the chin. Like Zach pointed out, I mean, you put an asterisk next to Toronto last year. Do you put an asterisk next to Golden State when Kyrie and Kevin were? You can't do that. Basketball's played. The Lakers won. They were the better team. So hopefully, the Miami Heat can get back on track and make it back and try to prove themselves different. But this is BS.
I understand the overall sentiment of, man, we would have really liked to see how we did with our whole team playing, right? We think we could have taken them. That's all fine. But once you get into the asterisk sentiment, it is literally an intrinsic part of the fabric of sports that things happen on your way to a championship. There is luck. There is injuries. That is true for your team, for the other team. And as you just pointed out, Matt, it happens every year. Right. It's not just this year. It's not just in the bubble. The Heat aren't the first team to have a couple starters even in the finals get hurt. We just saw it last season. So, or whatever, how many seasons we're on? it is just part of the game.
Right.
Moving on, let's go to AD and LeBron. They have talked about their lack of jealousy between each other all season. No subtweet there. Anthony Davis told Dave McMenamin and Malika Andrews, quote, like he tells me, this is your team. This is your time. Like, I'm good. This is quoting LeBron. If I retire today, I'm fine. So, Matt, is Anthony Davis saying LeBron tells him that the Lakers are his team? BS or real talk?
I think it's real talk. I think LeBron realizes that, he needs AD as much as anyone does. And I kind of look at the Lakers like a really fancy luxury car where AD is sitting in the back and LeBron's still the driver.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's still LeBron's team, but LeBron's still the most important piece to that team, but it's definitely AD's team because for night in, night out, LeBron's going into year 18. AD is still fairly young, still getting better. So, everything is definitely built around AD now.
I think it's real talk that LeBron is telling Anthony Davis that for sure. I believe that. But it's BS because it's still LeBron's team, and it's probably going to be LeBron's team. Like Matt said, LeBron's still driving the car. LeBron's still running the offense.
Yes.
LeBron still controls every possession. He makes a lot of decisions. He just won Finals MVP. This is still LeBron's team in the sense that we talk about whose team it is. Really, it's both their teams. They're both incredible players. So I'll split the difference.
LeBron is doing what any great, smart vet is supposed to do. You're supposed to encourage your next man up, and AD is definitely the next man up, and LeBron's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing.
Can I work on your analogy a little bit and say that AD is the engine if LeBron's still the driver?
I like AD sitting in the back with his feet
up and getting chauffeured around position.
LeBron's driving, yeah.
There we go. All right, next up, Brooklyn Nets head coach Steve Nash, who is setting the bar high for his team next season. In an interview with the Yes Network, Nash made it very clear that he sees the Nets as title contenders this upcoming season. By the way, he said this on the jump as well. I just want to point that out. He said we're playing for a championship to yes. He said we're going to frame everything we do in the lens of, is this a championship characteristic or is this worth championship quality? That is actually a fantastic quote and an interesting way to see things. Zach, do you think it is BS or real talk?
Absolutely real talk. Provided Kevin Durant is at least 90% of what he was before tearing his Achilles, I actually think people are sleeping on the Nets. That people are kind of rooting for drama and the soap opera and when does it all blow up and when is there going to be passive-aggressive tweets and this and that. Fine, you can root for that. It's funny and all that. The Nets have a lot of talent. Whether they trade for a third star by consolidating some of their role players or not, whether they keep the supporting cast just as it is, this is a really good team. They're deep, they're versatile. They have Kevin freaking Durant and Kyrie Irving on their team. Yes, they're playing for a championship. Absolutely.
Yes, this is definitely 100% real talk. The health. Everything depends around the health around their two stars, but there's no reason why they're not in a handful of the top 4 or 5 teams in the NBA to win a championship. Kevin Durant coming back, Kyrie coming back, and then like you said, they have a very talented supporting cast. Whether they get that third star in the starting option and have an amazing bench is still to be determined. But they're definitely one of the top 5-6 teams in the NBA, no question.
Yeah, I think it's real talk, no question. And by the way, that's what's going to put so much pressure on teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, who are going to obviously be trying to keep their super megastar, but also on teams like the Heat and the rest of the East. Just to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and get to the finals is going to be a lot harder because the Nets will be such a threat. All right, guys, coming up, speaking of the Heat, we're going to talk a little Bam Adebayo. Is he completely untouchable in any potential trade talks? That subject has come up around the league in the last couple days, and we will discuss it next. Back to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols here with Matt Barnes, Zach Lowe, and guys, Michael Jordan, we know, one of the greatest competitors in the history of sports, not one to acknowledge that he might not be able to handle something, but Cigar Aficionado just made public a fuller transcript of the interview that they published back in 2017, and the additional comments included some interesting perspective on the social media era. Now, at the time, Jordan told Cigar Aficionado he's making a comparison between Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, how you could really not compare players between eras. Gee, I wonder who he was really talking about. And he said that Tiger played at his peak somewhere toward the end of my career. He said, then what changed from that time frame to now is social media, Twitter, and all those types of things. And that has invaded the personalities and personal time of individuals. For someone like myself, and this is what Tiger deals with, he said, I don't know if I could have survived in this Twitter era where you don't have the privacy that you'd want and what seems to be very innocent can always be misinterpreted. So, Matt, first of all, that's an interesting acknowledgement from MJ that anything is harder now than when he played, right? Because, of course, the defenses were harder and the hand checking was harder and he walked uphill both ways to school and all of that stuff. How do
all
you
true,
think,
by the way.
Yeah, clearly. Clearly. How do you think MJ would have fared in the social media era? As someone, by the way, you saw everything really change while you were playing.
Absolutely. It would have been tough. It's definitely a different time now. Social media has been the greatest gift you could say we've had, and one of the biggest curses we have. And one of the reasons why it's the biggest curse because it gives a lot of idiots voices. And a lot of negative people with a lot of negative energy will just say random stuff they would never say to your face. So I think if MJ played in this era, he would have been more closed off than he already was, and he was already really closed off. So, everything is about timing. Luckily, he didn't have to deal with it, but it's a real issue that people don't really understand how much hate and negativity weighs into social media. People always want to jump on Kevin Durant for responding and firing back, but I understand because, negativity, death threats, you're talking about your kids, your ex-wife, you name it, there's nothing off limits because you're not held accountable because you're behind the computer, behind the phone. So I completely understand where MJ is coming from.
I'm a little torn here because on the one hand, I like to imagine MJ is so cool and was so cool. He wouldn't even be on Twitter. Who cares? He wouldn't even see anything on Twitter. And so what? You snap a photo of MJ at a casino at 2:45 in the morning having a whiskey. Guess what? He hangs 50 on your team the next day, so it doesn't even matter. Then again, would he have a whole team of branding and advertising people forcing him to be on Twitter and Instagram and ruining his life by putting him on social media? Bottom line, MJ would be fine. This is Michael Jordan. He survived the bad boys fouling him. He survived Bill Laimbeer. He survived social media. It's Michael Jordan.
He still would have been a killer. I'm just saying it's just a different time, obviously.
And it's acknowledging, and I appreciate that he's acknowledging this, and that sort of shows how he is still, he's a team owner. He is still very extra layer to deal with. Look, we saw the most dramatic example of it. It's not Kevin Durant answering Twitter followers. It's not the burner phones. It's not what has gotten, say, former general managers in trouble. LeBron James, during the 2011 finals, was subject and heard and let in so much noise that he now has acknowledged it affected his performance and then went to the length of turning off all of his phones and social media for the next 5 or 6 years during the playoffs. It is something to navigate. It is interesting to me to see Jordan recognize that. The whole interview is great. It's definitely worth checking out. All right, I want to get to a current All-Star who is extension eligible this offseason. Bam Adebayo. Last week during Pat Riley's end-of-season news conference, he called Bam a, quote, cornerstone of the Heat. He said, it's in our best interest to do the right thing by him. Zach, you are the driver of the Bam wagon. Look, anyone who wants to trade, there it is. Anyone who wants to trade for Bam should not call the Heat, apparently. But what do you think about that extension that he is eligible for? Because there is a feeling of, oh, can you help us out, Bam? Just wait a year. That will give us more room in the cap, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if he's going to want to wait that long.
Well, and you could understand why he would say, why should I wait that long? I just was outstanding the entire playoffs. I was arguably our best player until the finals. Then I played hurt in the finals and gave it a go. And yeah, give me the money now, but I'm a max player. Give me the max. As for the trades, yeah, for all practical purposes, Bam Adebayo is untouchable. No one is getting Bam Adebayo from the Heat in any deal that exists in real life. The guy has proven himself an all-star and now an all-NBA level player, and I'm not putting a ceiling on him yet. That guy, that's how good he's been.
I think Bam's been great. He's definitely a max player. He should be untouchable. But at the same time, we have to understand that. Oh, excuse me. Thought I had to sneeze. Miami
you cannot sneeze in public right now, Matt. People will freak out.
I held it in. Miami got with all due respect to what they accomplished, I think they were a little bit ahead of schedule even than what they thought. Obviously Jimmy thought they could make the finals, but I think in the organization they thought we still have a young team, we're growing. I think they skipped some steps this year, and I hope that little taste of success doesn't hurry their process. I think Bam's important. I think Tyler Hero's important. But I think if they're going to try to make a run back, they may try to throw maybe a Tyler Hero and some of the other younger players into a trade to get that third consistent score. So like I said, I hope that little taste of the finals and wanting to win a ring doesn't hurry up their process, because they have a great young core, and I'd like to see them stay together for a while.
I would also just say that whole idea of, hey, help the team out, put it off a year, it will give us more room and more flexibility. It hasn't gone great for some other situations. And you only need to look as far as next door to Jimmy Butler, right down the locker room, who was told that by the Timberwolves and got so frustrated. Well, we know what happened there. But even with situations that worked out more amicably, right? This is a different situation, but Zach, the Utah Jazz didn't make Gordon Hayward the offer he expected the year that he expected it. And when it came time years later to decide if he wanted to stay with the team as a free agent or not, it factored into his decision, right?
I mean, you have to ask Gordon. I know he's hinted at that in the past, that they matched an offer sheet from the Hornets, I believe. The archetype of this situation was Kawhi Leonard with the Spurs. They asked Kawhi Leonard to wait on his max extension to keep his little cap hold on and sign LaMarcus Aldridge, and it worked. And I don't know what role that played in whatever happened between Kawhi and San Antonio, but of course it would be convenient to have more cap space for next summer when a lot of guys are free agents, including Giannis. But there's a certain point where if Bam feels he's earned it and he would be completely justified, you can promise him everything. You could say after next year, 100% blood oath, all that. But, it's always nice to have it done and locked in and not hanging over your head. And you could understand why he and his agent would say, we've earned it.
Well, I think the consistency of superstars getting hurt of late is a reason why you don't listen to any of that. Like, Miami knows what they have. This guy's continuing to get better. First-time All-Star. Well-faceted, can do everything on the court. Pay him or lose him at the end of the day is what I think, because you see a DeMarcus Cousins where he was on the brink of touching over $200 million and he hasn't consistently been back in the rotation.
Yeah.
And you see KD go down, you see Clay go down, you see Kyrie go down, you see Steph go down. Injuries are part of the game, and you have to understand you have to secure as much money as you can because you only have a small amount of time, even if it's a double-digit career in this league.
You know what our friend Tracy McGrady says? Secure the bag. All right, coming up, Kyle Korver spoke very powerfully about the Bucks' decision to walk out of a game at a town hall this past weekend at Creighton, his alma mater. Stick around for that. It is really, really worth hearing. First,